What's up, my fellow recappers? Today we're going to take a look at the epic historical action film, Kingdom of Heaven. Spoilers ahead. The year is 1184 in France, and an opening title reveals that it's been over 100 years since the Christian army seized Jerusalem. But since then, these holy lands have become a place for lords and peasants alike to flee the oppression of Europe and seek redemption, fortune, and salvation. A French knight, Baron Godfrey of Ibelin, arrives at a small French village with a retinue of soldiers. Although they appear to be just passing through, Godfrey's right-hand man, the Hospitaller, informs him that the local blacksmith is the man that Godfrey seeks. But he also warns him that this blacksmith is in mourning, as his wife recently committed suicide.
He was a suicide, cut off her head.
Now Godfrey approaches the blacksmith, Balian of Ibelin, and informs him that he is in fact Balian's father, and that Balian isn't only his son, but also the only heir to his title. He tells Balian that he's headed to Jerusalem, a land of opportunity and a fresh start, and asks him to join him. But Balian refuses. The loss of his wife is still hurting him too much. Now once the knights have left, Balian retreats to the forge to ponder what he just heard. And as he's hammering and smelting, a priest works at convincing him to head to Jerusalem with his father. The priest claims that not only will Balian receive redemption there, but his dead wife will too.
You will have no peace so long as you stay here.
For now, she wanders hell as punishment for her suicide. So in a rage, Balian slays the priest and then sets his stables alight, fleeing as it burns and crashes behind him. Balian meets up with Godfrey and his knights on the road and asks if it's true that in Jerusalem he'll be able to erase his sins. Well, Godfrey tells him that they'll find out together, and then welcomes him to his entourage.
We can find out together.
So as they're traveling to Jerusalem, Godfrey deigns to teach his son how to use the sword like a knight. Balian takes the lessons immediately, proving himself a natural. It's lucky that he was given these lessons too, because sometime later, a small group of soldiers approach their camp to arrest Balian for the murder of a priest. And although Balian's willing to go with them and face his sins, Godfrey refuses it. As such, a fight ensues.
What he says is true. They have the right to take me.
Before we go on, like the video, smash the subscribe button, turn on that notification bell, or Slender Man will haunt your dreams. It looks like a hopeless situation as Balian, Godfrey, and his men are outnumbered. The men are cut down around him and Godfrey takes an arrow under the arm. But these are knights. And with a little bit of blood and swordplay, they manage to take down and fight off their attackers. But Godfrey's in bad shape as his wounds quickly become infected. But they march on toward Jerusalem nonetheless. And on the way, they come across the camp of Guy de Lusignan, prospective future king of Jerusalem. He's a clear enemy of Godfrey, and now he's an enemy of Balian too. In fact, he almost seems pleased that Godfrey's injured the way he is, and a little later on, he exchanges barbs with Balian.
Who is this?
Confirming their new animosity towards one another. So after weeks of marching, they arrive at the port city of Messina, where Godfrey's taken to a hospital for better care. But it's too late, and he knows it. With his final words, Godfrey speaks of the Kingdom of Heaven, a world where Muslims and Christians live in peace with one another. He speaks as if it is more than a dream, but a reality.
Do not disappoint me.
And later that night, before passing away, Godfrey knights Balian and names him his son and heir. And then, after weeks of struggle, Godfrey dies. So with his new title, Balian attempts the final leg of his journey across the ocean and towards Jerusalem. But a storm strikes where his boat's sailing, capsizing it, seeming to kill him and everyone on board. But Balian wakes the next day on the shores of a beach, broken and beaten. He's gathering the few things he can as he readies to continue his journey. And there's a horse there too, a survivor from the shipwreck, but it flees when he gets too close. For what must have been days, Balian's wandering the desert, until finally coming upon a stream. He falls into it, drinking the water like the life source it is. And then he looks up and sees the horse across the way, drinking the same water. Well, this time Balian captures it. So with his horse in tow, Balian continues across the desert, only to be accosted by two Saracens on horseback. One of them claims that the horse is his, as it's on his land.
That is his horse!
Well, Balian refuses to hand it over, and as such, the men come to blows. Despite Balian having maybe a day of training, he manages to overpower and defeat the Saracen man attacking him. But when it comes to his server, Ahmad, Balian spares his life under the condition that he'd be taken to Jerusalem. He arrives at Jerusalem some days later and immediately frees Ahmad from his service, an act that Ahmad will not forget. He then starts his way through the busy city, not sure what he's doing, but knowing that God will lead him. And sure enough, he's soon approached by a group of Knight Hospitallers, who recognize Balian's sword as Godfrey's. Balian tells them who he is, and they welcome him as one of their own.
My lord.
And from there, Balian's taken to his new home, which was once Godfrey's. It's a lush palace, and while there he meets Princess Sibylla of Jerusalem, the daughter of the king and wife to Guy. They talk briefly, but there seems to be a spark that can't be ignored. Balian meets with the Hospitaller, who begins to explain the tense politics holding the city together. The king of Jerusalem has worked hard to create peace between Christians and Saracens in the city, turning the city into a sacred land for both religions.
I've lost my religion.
Unfortunately, the Knights Templar don't hold this same view, and as the Hospitaller takes him through the city, we see some Knights Templar being hanged for killing Saracens without recourse. Now, these killings have created tension between the two major armies, living and governing within the walls of Jerusalem, the Knights of Templar and the Knights of Hospitaller. The leader of the Knights of Templar is Reynald, and he argues with the leader of the Knights of the Hospitaller, Tiberius, on the merits of killing non-Christian enemies. Tiberius thinks that all religions can live in peace together.
Prove it.
But Reynald thinks that this is a pipe dream at best. So Balian's lead to meet Tiberius, who was a good friend of Godfrey's. He welcomes Balian with open arms and explains his role in trying to mediate peace in the city. The way he's speaking, war's imminent, and he's simply doing what he can do to hold it at bay. And Balian's finally taken to meet King Baldwin. Baldwin is a wise and thoughtful man and also friend to Godfrey, but it's revealed that he was born with leprosy, an ailment that weakens him daily and threatens the peace of Jerusalem. He speaks to Balian of what it means to be a knight, hoping that Balian will demonstrate these qualities.
Very good.
So the next day, Balian's taken out of Jerusalem to the land that he owns in Ibelin. It's a barren wasteland of sand and stone, lacking water and any chance at fertility. But Balian is more than a blacksmith and a knight. He's also an engineer, and with his help and that of his people, he soon constructs an irrigation system which sees water flow through the land, transforming it into a lush green pasture. And now he's growing used to his new role, new lands, and new life. While living in Ibelin, Sibylla comes to visit him. She pretends that she's passing through, and Balian offers her a place to stay for the night. They eat together, talk a lot, flirt like there's no tomorrow.
Did they give you something to eat?
And that night, she comes to him and asks that he bed her. It looks for a moment that Balian might refuse, but he doesn't have that sort of willpower. Soon, they're in bed together, and neither seem to mind it. So the year is 1185, some months after Balian leaves Jerusalem for Ibelin. Reynald and Guy come across a Saracen caravan in the desert. Pretending that it's armed, they attack the caravan without mercy, and this creates chaos within Jerusalem, as Tiberius argues that the leader of the Saracens, Saladin, is sure to seek retribution for this act.
Must not go to war with Saladin.
The Templars claim that the caravan was armed, that it was their right, and show little remorse for what they did. As the two sides argue, a message is brought to court. Saladin has indeed taken the attack personally and now marches an army on the city of Kerak. Balian was never one for peace, and when he learns of the attack on Kerak, he soon leaves to join. Well, Balian arrives at Kerak with a small force and is ordered inside the city to await the arrival of the army marching from Jerusalem. But outside the walls, he sees the people of the surrounding country flee an oncoming force of thousands, desperate to try and make it to the city's high walls. Balian realizes that the people will be slain if the army isn't held off, and thus, channeling his inner knight, Balian leads a small army onto the field to hold off a larger force, allowing the people to escape inside the city.
Are you with me?
Balian's army's small, tiny in comparison to the Saracen one, but they charge headfirst into the fray, and as expected, they're easily overwhelmed and defeated. Balian does what he can, but soon he's taken down, beaten, and captured. And as luck has it, the Saracen man that Balin spared earlier, Ahmad, is in fact the Chancellor to Saladin. Balin's brought before him, and is spared for his previous good deeds. So Saladin and King Baldwin meet outside the gates of Kerak to discuss terms. Baldwin asks him to return his armies back where they came from, and in return Baldwin will punish Reynold, as he deserves it for his crimes. And indeed, upon returning to the city, Baldwin promptly strips Reynold of his position,
On your knees.
beats him, and then has him locked up. Well, Baldwin's getting weaker by the day, and soon he's gonna die. So knowing this, he asks Balin to lead his army when he's gone, but on one condition, that he marries Sibylla. It's a tempting offer, but Balin knows that if he says yes, Guy will be killed, and this Balin cannot allow. As such, he's forced to turn the offer down.
I cannot be the cause of that.
As grateful as Guy should be for this, he knows that Balin is a threat and seeks guidance in Reynold, who suggests that Guy have Balin assassinated. Well, Baldwin dies soon after this, and Guy's crowned the new king of Jerusalem, much to the obvious dismay of Tiberius and Sibylla. Back on his land of Ibelin, Balin's unexpectedly attacked by 2 Knights of the Templar. It's pretty close, but he manages to take him down before they're able to kill him. Now with the king dead, and thinking that Balin is too, Guy releases Reynold from prison and orders him to give him a war.
Give me a war.
Which Reynold does with aplomb. He leads a force against the caravan transporting Saladin's sister, kills her, and sends her back to Saladin. As a result, Saladin sends an emissary to Guy, demanding punishment of those who killed his sister, and that Guy abandon Jerusalem once and for all. Guy kills the emissary, and thus, war has come. So, Guy quickly goes about raising an army, ready to march from Jerusalem and meet Saladin's forces head on. Balin's the only commander against the move, pleading with Guy that if he does go to war, he should not leave Jerusalem undefended,
We should meet the enemies of God.
and to remain close to the walls and the source of water it provides. But Guy laughs him off, waves him away, and tells him that he's just a blacksmith who doesn't know what he's saying. So as expected, the armies meet and the forces of Guy and Jerusalem are destroyed. Saladin then meets with Guy and Reynold to discuss terms, but quickly goes about dispatching Reynold and putting Guy in chains.
A king does not kill a king.
He doesn't want terms, he wants Jerusalem. So with the armies of Jerusalem defeated, the defense of the grand city now falls on the shoulders of Balin and Balin alone. He and the few men remaining get about strengthening up the defenses and preparing for the oncoming siege. A speech is also made to the people, a last-ditch effort to whip him up into a frenzy. And when that doesn't work, when Balin's told there aren't enough knights left to defend the walls, Balin tells the men of the city to kneel,
Kneel.
and then commands them to stand as knights. Asked if turning a man into a knight makes them a better fighter, he responds with a simple yes. So the armies of Saladin arrive at Jerusalem and attack under the cover of night with a vengeance. The first assault is just a test, as the great army shoots missiles covered in flame over and into the walls. The walls hold out, but Balin realizes that they won't be able to forever. He admits that they need to offer terms of surrender to Saladin, ones that ensure the safety of the people. So the next day sees the forces approach the walls en masse. Before the battle starts, the Saracens send Godfrey out half naked, riding a donkey and wearing a fake crown as a means to further humiliate the man. And then the second phase of the battle begins.
Mercy.
As more missiles are launched at the walls, the large army slowly marches forward, pushing their siege towers closer to the walls. Balin's prepared for this, and using markers that he laid out earlier, he's able to measure their distance from the battlements and launch the appropriate counterattacks. These are missiles of their own, flying into mass groupings of the Saracen army and obliterating those in the way. But it's not enough, and soon the siege towers are at the walls. And as those siege towers attempt to penetrate the walls, Balin and his men somehow manage to hold them back. Using fire and oil of their own, they light them up and watch them crack and tumble before their eyes. It's a small victory and possibly useless in the long run, but they last another day.
It was his son at Kerak.
So now the third day is where the fighting is the worst. Men have breached the walls now, climbing the battlements and engaging in sword-to-sword combat. Balion's involved, swinging his blade wherever he can, trying his best to keep the army at bay. In a truly brilliant move, too, an anti-siege tower mechanism set up the night before spears through the towers at the wall and then manages to use their own weight against them, pulling them down, knocking them over like dominoes. All Saladin can do is watch in shock.
Queen of Jerusalem.
And that night, Saladin learns of a weak point in the city's defenses, a wall that's just about ready to break. So the next morning, his forces attack the wall, tear it down, and then stream into the city. Fighting ensues in the streets, with the knights swinging blades against the Saracens. But it's a hopeless situation, with the knights heavily outnumbered. But when the fighting dies down, Saladin pulls his men back and allows Balian a chance to parley with him, which he does. He meets him out in the middle of the field and promises to surrender the city as long as Saladin promises to honor both religions inside the city, allowing Christians to live in peace beside Muslims. Saladin, seeing the wisdom in the request, agrees.
Then under these terms I surrender Jerusalem.
With the fighting over now, Balian pays a visit to Sibilla, where he tells her that his brother's dream, the kingdom of heaven, lives on in the hearts and minds of men. He wants to be with her, but she's still a queen, and he tells her that when she decides to stop being a queen, he'll come for her. So with the war done and the Saracens taken back the city, Balian realizes that there's nothing left for him in the Holy Lands. He travels back to his home in France, the same village he left some 4 years ago. As he arrives, King Richard appears, and thinking Balian to be a simple blacksmith, asks where Balian, the defender of Jerusalem, is, as he wishes to recruit him for a new quest. But Balian simply says that he's a blacksmith and doesn't know. He left his home to find redemption, and as Balian looks out over his land, his home, we see that he found it. Even better is that Sibilla then appears from nowhere, apparently choosing Balian over a kingdom. A final title crawl reveals that King Richard's war went on for 3 years to no success, and even now, 1,000 years later, peace in the kingdom of heaven still remains elusive. This was a recap of the film Kingdom of Heaven, produced by 20th Century Fox and released in 2005. Directed by Ridley Scott, it starred Orlando Bloom, Eva Green, Liam Neeson, and Jeremy Irons. That was an epic film, full of epic scenes. What was your favorite moment? Tell us with the hashtag CinemaRecap in the comments.